How's it going, everybody? My name is Ryan. He is Abhi. We are the Expansion Bros, and we are back for episode number 2, week number 2 of our journey through this season. And so far, Abhi, congratulations on your team being top of the league, buddy.
Yeah, it's that
I mean,
meme.
I didn't think it was going to happen.
It's that meme where, like, as you see all the medal placers, and we're actually first this time. Usually we'd be in like 10th place, and we're popping the champagne, biting the medal, and all that. But we're actually first place. So, woo!
True and true.
I mean, those rows.
Still third. Still third in points percentage. So if anybody wants to talk about number of games,
who asked that? Did anyone in the comment section ask that? If you didn't comment, go comment on the old podcast and ask that.
I'm getting ahead of it. So third on points percentage is still great, right? So it's like, you haven't played 8 more games than everybody else and just happened to win them, right? So, I mean, you guys are at the top where you belong. And the Sabres, what a week is all I have to say about us. We'll get to the Sabres again. We're going to bump them to the back half of the show today, but we'll kick it off with the best team in the league until we pass you. I guess you're going to have to lead off the show, right?
When's that, in a decade?
Hey, we're coming for you. You're going to get 9. Next time we see you, we're putting 9 past you too. Don't worry.
I'm shivering in my boots. You're going to put 9 past Demko into Smith.
Hey, that'll be the game that regresses your PDO entirely. You're going to that's the game where you guys are going to shoot 2% and have a 75% save percentage. You're going to have like a 77% PDO.
We're going to get 100 shots on Devin Levi and one's going to go in.
Yeah, that I wouldn't put it past the Sabres to allow 100 shots in a game either.
And of those 180 will be 2-on-1s, so that our PDO will actually be like 99, so that we have space to go back up.
There you go. I mean, honestly, the PDO wave. I showed you the graphic earlier. You guys started off really high on PDO, and you've regressed a little bit in PDO. You had like a 95 PDO stretch over 5 games, where I think you went 3-2. Mm-hmm. You guys went like about 500, and that was your regression. So, I know we've had some comments about analytics already and me bringing them up in this podcast, but that's the kind of thing, right? You can still be a good team and regress to the mean, right? You're not going 5-0 in those games because you're not getting the crazy like 110 PDO you guys have been getting. For those that don't know, PDO is basically just adding your team's save percentage to your team's shooting percentage, and usually teams hover around 100. That's where like league average generally sits. So teams overperforming by like 108 where you guys are due to come back. But like I said, it doesn't necessarily signal the end of the world for the Canucks. Like, oh, they're frauds, they're not good teams. I mean, I was catching some Canucks games, man. You know what? The one thing that impresses me most about the Canucks, the thing I love about like watching the Canucks is, like you said, it's good hockey. They're making the right decisions. But, I'm just watching some things. The pressure put on via the back check that then immediately results in an odd man rush the other way, right? That defender jumps in, they drop it to him. Your forwards are checking him, and all of a sudden, boom, 2-on-1 the other way. And that's, you guys are going to have a good shooting percentage on 2-on-1s, like you mentioned.
Yeah, and I think you see that especially in what I would have considered the fourth line at the beginning of the year, becoming one of the best third lines of the NHL. You can see it in the expected goals for percentage. I think they're top 20 in the league. It's Bluger, Garland, and Dakota Joshua. Dakota Joshua is now on pace for a 20-goal season, which is not something I would have expected based on last year.
When I was catching some of the highlights, I'm like, this Dakota Joshua guy, like, I love him. Like, he's great. You plug him on your third line, fourth line, you're just chilling, right? And like you said, he's on pace for 20, so it's crazy. But he's the kind of player that he does the right thing. And I'm noticing that a lot of your players, even, Petey and the boys, they're getting in front of the net, and net front presence on shots and things are huge, right? Like it's such a major difference for the goaltender when he's got traffic in front versus not.
No, and as a goalie, I can relate. When you can't see, I played ball hockey, as you can see. Shout out Tri-City Ball Hockey Association. When you can't see the puck, it's 1,000 times more difficult, right? Especially if you're someone who's good with the fundamentals. You keep your body square to the puck and you keep your glove up and you keep your stick down. The big thing that can throw you off, right, when you have someone out front is not being able to see things. And the other thing is, right, when you have a body out front, you're leaving big opportunity for tips and deflections and chaos in general. And those tip goals are outside of maybe the 2-on-1 one-timers or whatever. Those are some of the hardest shots to save. Just because you have such little time to react to it.
It's like you read my freaking mind. I was in my head the whole time you were talking about like the traffic and the other option. I'm like, please talk about tips. Please talk about tips. Right. And I was just watching the highlights from the Blackhawks game when you guys played Chicago.
Yeah.
And the Ilya Mikheyev tip in front of the net, right? I think Dakota Joshua, I think it might have been against the Predators. I think it might have been him or Hoglander had like a deflection as well.
Yeah.
It was Hoglander tip one by Saros. But back to the Mikheyev goal from the Chicago game, I looked that up. That's only a 0.07 xG. So when I talk about expected goals percentage and things like that, like we're talking these chances are very, very low percentage. But anybody that's ever watched hockey knows that. How often do you see a deflected goal? Like it's at least once per game and maybe
fairly
once
common
per team. Yeah. It happens all the time. And yes, it's a 0.07, right? You're not sitting back door on a wide open cage, tapping it in the empty net, right? Getting a 0.75, but 0.07. And like you said, it makes a huge difference. And just getting that to go in allows your team to play so loose and free. And your transition game is something that's I've really enjoyed watching in this short amount of time that I've been paying extra attention to the Canucks.
Yeah. To go back to your previous point as well, I think, deflections are like point shots with deflections or shots from the side or even from the slot that are deflected are a lot easier to get than the backdoor tap-in. So the backdoor tap-in might have that really high expectation of a goal, but maybe you're going to get those 10 opportunities of the tipped point shot for every one backdoor opportunity, So I think it ends up evening itself out. And as far as the breakout goes and all that, I think it's a big improvement on defense, right? When you move Tyler Myers from your top 4 into your top 6 into the role he actually belongs, and when you get some good puck moving defensemen, and Hughes and Hronek are obviously the great examples, but everyone's been much improved. And I think what Tocchet preaches is making the simple play, and a lot of the times the simple play for a breakout is just a little bank pass off the boards. Whereas like before, some people were trying to play hero and shoot one up the middle for a breakaway, and then it leads to a turnover. I think making the simple plays, making the simple breakouts has been the big difference for the Canucks. And it's like I talked about last time. It's not about playing mistake-free hockey, but making the simple plays to avoid unnecessary mistakes has been really, really helpful, and I think has led to a lot of our success.
And obviously goaltending too is a big factor, right? You get the puck out of the zone, and then when they get it back in, they got to go up against Demko or DeSmith. Like, come on, man, that's not fun. That's not fun now for anybody in the league. Like, first of all, it's tough. Like I said earlier, like the back check is great. You make the simple play, you got to regroup, get back into the zone. That's those small plays that, like, watching Buffalo, that they haven't really done well this season. Their zone exits have been terrible. But you guys just getting it across the blue line, regroup, breathe, and it allows Demko to not get worn down or tired or DeSmith or whatever, to get just peppered with shots and constant pressure. You guys don't get hemmed in the zone very much. And I don't know, this last 4 games since we recorded last, you guys are 2-0-2, beating Blackhawks, beating the Predators, teams you guys should be beating. Lost in a shootout to Minnesota. Minnesota was the better team there, but you're gonna have those games. And then against Dallas, that was the Dallas game was very entertaining. Like, it's just as a neutral fan, like, it was great.
Yeah, the Minnesota game is a game we would have just lost last year. We would not have gotten the extra point, and I think that's where you can really see the difference in this. And again, this year we're hanging around with Dallas, and I was looking at Dallas's post-game press conference, and Tocchet and Pete DeBoer were kind of having a little love fest there, complimenting each other on how great they are at coaching. But it's all well deserved. So I know we talked about 4 games this week, 2-0-2. DeSmith split the games with Demko, and DeSmith was brilliant both games. Only gave up the 1 goal through 3 periods and overtime against the Wild, and only gave up 2 goals against the Predators, who are a very solid team. And we know the Wild are rebounding as well, Kaprizov and the boys. So I think DeSmith played immaculate this week. Demko had a bit of a rougher week, 3 goals um, against the Blackhawks, and then 3 in regulation, plus the overtime goal yesterday as well. But I wouldn't say he's playing poorly. Just I think, as you mentioned, regression to the mean. And again, as a goalie, you could as many as you can have some 2-1 shutouts and all that goals against games. Sometimes you're just going to let in 3 or 4. You can do everything right, and sometimes it's just the deflection. Sometimes it's just that one time, or maybe it's just like I remember there was one game I was playing goalie and we were short-staffed, only had like 5 players the whole game, and there was a one-timer across, and I was dead tired. I reached, and I just couldn't get there. And sometimes that's just going to happen, It might be something that's like a .05 expected goal, but, it's just the circumstances. You're just not going to get there, and your save percentage isn't going to be what you want. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily played bad. It's just how the cookie crumbles sometimes.
Yeah, it's all going to even out in the end, right? We can talk like one game of 82 is such a small sample size too. Like every team is going to get dominated. Every team's going to get a couple lucky bounces. Every team's going to lose one that they didn't deserve to lose. It's all going to happen. It's just, on the whole of the season and where we're going, right? You want to be in that mentality of like, okay, yes, we lost, but we still played well. And like, I guess praise the process, not the result kind of thing, right? Like just because you played well and lost doesn't mean that, oh no, you suck, like you lost. If you played well, you played well. Speaking of playing well, you guys have a stretch here that you can really start to get on a run. I know like you guys have only lost 1 game in regulation here in December. You guys have played the Flames, the Devils, the Wild, the Hurricanes, the Lightning, Panthers, Wild, Blackhawks, Predators, Stars so far, and you guys have won all but the Devils game. The Devils are a team on the rise right now. But here to close out 2023, you guys have the Sharks and then the Flyers. Now the Flyers are playing well than I expect, but that's a game that I think you guys should have. And in tomorrow night, Saturday night, we're recording this on Friday again. Saturday night's game against the Sharks. If you were the coach, who are you starting? Are you starting Demko with hoping him to get back to that insane form, or are you rocking with DeSmith? Let Demko get a few more days off because of that holiday break. And DeSmith's allowed 3 goals in his last 3 games played. Do you ride the hot hand here, or do you go back to Demko on home ice?
That's a very good question. I think DeSmith, he often suffers from not playing for weeks on end. And I think, looking at the schedule coming up, there's plenty of opportunities. There's a back-to-back on the 8th and the 9th and lots of games and 2-game stretches. I think while you have the opportunity here, you're going to have to play DeSmith quite a bit there. And I say gonna have to, like it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to play Casey DeSmith at all. But I think you give the start to Demko here, and then I think you give him the 28th as well, and maybe even the 2nd, and then you can play DeSmith on the 4th, and then maybe either the 8th or the 9th. Because ultimately, right, it's great to have DeSmith come in and know he's going to be solid, but after a couple of whatever games, it's good to maybe give a little confidence booster to Demko. Not that I think he's lacking confidence at all, but, and again, not to downplay the Sharks either. It was just the last podcast where I was pumping their tires. But certainly the Sharks are a bit of an easier assignment than, say, some of the other teams coming up in the schedule.
Well, and that's what I'm looking at. I'm personally looking at, like, you're going to want Demko as fresh as possible for the stretch, right? Maybe that PDO regression's coming. You're hoping it's coming for the save percentage if you're Demko, or the shooting percentage, not the save percentage if you're Demko. So I'm looking at it like, give Demko a few extra days off, right? Because he played against Dallas. You'd give him probably a week off, let him recharge around the holidays. You've got the Sharks. You guys should be able to handle that one. The Flyers, I mean, look, if I'm looking at it, right, you play him against the Flyers, who are the toughest opponent out of your next 3. You got Sharks, Flyers, Senators. Senators are on an absolute skid. So maybe he plays well against the Flyers. You roll him right again against the Senators, and then DeSmith against the Blues, right? It's in my opinion, I think you want Demko as fresh as possible for February, March, and April.
I see your point. I think at some point, though, he's a starting goalie, right? And you do have to play your starting goalie. So, again, that's why I'm kind of the mind that you do play him against the Sharks. And
Yeah, and you guys have the luxury of having 2 goals. We have the luxury of having this debate on this podcast.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah, and not too long from now, you guys are coming up against the Sabres January 13th.
Yeah.
We're coming to town, buddy. Better be there for it.
Oh, that'll be a fun one. Maybe that one might deserve a little extra long.
You nervous?
Special. No.
No, well, because the run's coming. Hey, we hit rock bottom against Columbus, and I guess we'll just transition into Buffalo now, since we're already talking about him. But we hit rock bottom against Columbus, and we immediately rebounded against Toronto, 9-3 win, and that was one that, yes, Samsonov looked horrible, but as has been said before, like when you start and get up into 7, 8, 9 goal games, it's not just a goaltending problem,
Mm-hmm. I'd like to read something aloud if that's all right.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find it here. Oh, okay, perfect. This is a quote from a certain Sabres fan I know. I'm 100% planning on being angry and just depressed all segment. I have zero faith in this franchise, zero faith in leadership, zero faith in this management, zero faith in this coaching, and zero faith in these players. It's never been more over. Sell the team, move the franchise. I don't give a fuck anymore. Pardon my language.
Well, listen.
Now, hold on.
I was in the building for that 9-4.
That quote is from a certain Ryan Rybread. And here, I'd like to make the building. I'd like to make the point of duality of Sabres fans. And this is something one of my friends has talked about a lot, is you guys have some of the highest highs and lowest lows on a week-to-week basis. This
team is insane.
Yeah. It feels like you guys should replace the Leafs, because it's supposed to be the Leafs' job to be like really crappy and really good at once. Like, it's speaking of Leafs, I think we'll get to that, but I think you did everyone in the NHL a favor with what you did against the Leafs. I think they recently came out with there was like a list of like 3 teams every fan base hates the most, and I think the Leafs were first or second for every single team except the Leafs, and the Kraken, who haven't been around long.
I think some Leafs fans may argue that their least favorite team is the Leafs.
Yeah, on that list, there was not a single team that hated themselves. Except the Canucks. We were number 3 on our own list.
That's amazing. You guys are a wild fan base. But no, I'm not just because they smoked Toronto. Like, I'm happy about it. I'm wearing my Leafs blow all year round in Buffalo t-shirt today. Like, listen, I'm happy about the win. I'm happy about the win, but if you think all of a sudden I've flipped from that stance after Tuesday night, that all of a sudden, we're making the playoffs, this team's great, they're electric, they're awesome. Their longest win streak this season is 2 games. They've done that once. This team hasn't strung 3 wins together this season. So, like, cool, you pumped the Leafs by 9 goals, but maybe, just maybe, try doing that the next game too. Don't just be like, cool, guys, we're out. We won a game. We can just pat ourselves on the back and give 75% effort in the next one. And that's what's so infuriating about this team. There's been no consistency. The offense isn't there. They're not fun to watch. They tried to transition to a defensive game, and they just haven't been able to play defense at all. They're still shit at keeping the puck out of the net. Excuse my language. Sorry. Getting riled up here. No, they still can't keep the puck out of the net, and they're supposedly sacrificing offense to keep the puck out of the net, but they're just as bad at defending as they were last year, but without the offense. The offense is just not there. So, like, everyone's saying, you had a team that everybody had a career year. It was bound to These kids are like 21. Of course he's having a career year in his second season. Like, that's the laziest argument. His rookie season where he played 10 games. He only put up 6 points. He played 60 and put up 40. Like, it's a career year.
Whoa, he got older and got better. What a surprise.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, the Sabres, and I also have zero time for the youngest team in the NHL argument. That I was at the arena on Tuesday. I was in line to get a LBL, and somebody's like, well, it's a learning experience. They are the youngest team in the league. I'm like, they're getting destroyed by Columbus. Columbus is full of veteran talent with Stanley Cup winners bursting at the seat, right? Like, I just don't give me the youngest team argument, because they were an incredibly young team last year that have been there and they got that close. So this team, listen, if they want to make me eat those words that I texted you after Tuesday night, if they want to make me eat those words, this is the perfect stretch. You're going to New York tomorrow, and then you got the Bruins coming to your barn before you get another chance at Columbus. String a couple together, beat New York, beat Boston, or at least get a point or something. Because, listen, the points have been kind of better, but over the last 15 games before that Columbus game, they were 5-10. So, the booze and the fire Donnie chance after a 9-4 loss to the Blue Jackets were probably deserved.
Yeah, you guys have been playing 500 hockey, it feels like, even on your bounce back. Like this week, you guys, in a week where you pumped the Leafs, you guys had 2 wins, 2 losses. And again, I think we joked that over the last 2 games, you guys do have a goal differential of +1. But usually when you pump a team 9-3, you want to have a little more than that. And again, it's 2 very, very impressive wins, right? Like, you guys beat the Golden Knights. They're the number 2 team in the league behind the Canucks, and defending
had
champs.
to say that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did have to say that.
You had to just throw that one in there. That they're the number 2 team.
In. Yeah. The 2 harder teams, definitely. I look at the Coyotes, and again, another team was pumping up last episode. But you guys really chose to lose to the 2 worst teams, and you beat the 2 better teams. That's got to be, silver lining is you guys can beat good teams. A lot of teams can't beat good teams, so that's certainly encouraging to hear if you manage to make the dance. But making the playoffs itself is its own battle, and if you guys aren't beating the bad teams, you're just not going to get there because you guys are too far behind.
And to me, it screams. The team's just not given 100%, and you can see it, right? It's almost like they read their own press. I don't know if they do or don't, but the Vegas game, thank God for Devin Levi, because that should not have been a game. Also, the smile on Jack Eichel's face after making it 2-1 Vegas was way too big for a 2-1 goal in the third period. He was like, oh yeah, got one over on you again. Buffalo sucks. I'm going to get the game-winning goal. Let's go, right? And then we just put 4 past him, and it's like, okay, 5-2 win Buffalo, right? But we didn't really deserve to be in that game at that point, but credit to the Sabres, like, they found a way to win. Levi got him to the third. Vegas took the lead, but then the offense is like, oh, thank you, Devin. We will now take over and go ahead and get us the win, right? And then after that, like, okay, I don't want to say you lucked into one, but like, it was the play was very much in Vegas's favor for the majority of that game. Benson's goal, absolutely beautiful.
Yes,
but then
nice.
you beat Vegas, right? You're like, oh, thank God we beat Vegas. You look at the schedule, you got Coyotes and Blue Jackets. You're like, okay, we can string a couple together here, get ourselves back in that wild card conversation. You turn around, get shut out by the Yotes, come back home, and obviously the 9-4 loss that we've been talking about. Like, this team is just like, they put up one good performance, and then they're like, okay, cool, we did good. We can just kind of, go through the motions until we get embarrassed again, and now we can all of a sudden give 125% effort. It's like they bounce between like 110 and 50% effort, like on a every other game basis. Like, just give 100 on a nightly basis. Like, lose to Toronto, I don't care. Like, but beat the Yotes with 100% effort, or I don't know. It's young team doing young team things.
And I think what we see with young teams, right, is the lack of consistency. And I think that's kind of the transition we've seen. Not to shoehorn the Canucks into everything, but what they found is they found a level of consistency, right? They were also a young team, right? They also had their young stars, and they're still a fairly young team. But a lot of their stars are starting to get into that middle age. And as we've seen, right, the commitment to back checking, the JT Miller committing to defending, right? And what that brings when you have those commitments is it brings a level of stability and it brings consistency. So even when the Canucks are losing, they're giving similar efforts and they're making little things that can be coached. With the Sabres, right, everything's just so sporadic. And they're going from 9-3 losses to 9-4 victories to 2-0 shutouts to 5-2 victories where you get carried by your goalie. Other games where your goalie sucks. It's hard to figure out what exactly you can do. With certain teams, maybe it's just their breakouts aren't great, or maybe they're just not finishing properly. So you figure out, as a coach, okay, I'm going to do this line combination, and I'm going to put these drills in practice, and hopefully that fixes the problem. And then whatever else pops up, we'll solve it as it needs. Whoever's on a slump, whatever. But with the Sabres, it's just everything's so multifaceted. I don't envy that coaching staff trying to figure out exactly what to do.
Well, I think the players, they just got to show up for him before the fans start chanting to fire him. Like if that's what's going to light the fire under you, cool. Like clearly it's even more of an indictment on the coaching staff that if you can't get these players up and what's getting them fired up is the fans telling them to fire you, like that's even more of a statement to me, right? Like sure. If Donnie's not getting the boys ready to go, here's a stat for you. The Sabres have only scored the first goal 14 out of 34 games this season. So they're always starting behind. And when they give up the first goal of the game, opponents score an average of 2.9 goals before the Sabres respond with a goal of their own. So it's over. First goal, it's over, right? It's just like it just screams coaching, getting these guys ready to play, and accountability, right? If the Tage Thompson line is just half-assing it at puck drop, I don't care. Start with the Oposo line or something. Like, it's weird, but do it. Like, hold these guys accountable. Like, and if they do only show up against good teams, we're going to have a good weekend because we got New York and Boston, right, as our next two. So, I'm just listen. It's pretty much over at this point because I haven't seen any reason to believe it's not. But it is doable, right? It's not mathematically improbable, right? They just need to win 2 out of every 3. But for a team whose longest win streak is 2, which occurred once, winning 2 out of 3 is tough because you got to win back to back somewhere in there, right? So you got to go 2-1 down for the entire season. Now you left yourself no wiggle room, and it's just at this point it's frustrating. We'll see what happens. We'll see if they just get back to being fun. Like that's half the battle right now.
Absolutely.
Listen, it's just. Last season was fun, right? They missed out by 1, but it was fun. We had offense. It was crazy. It was everything was happening. This season, exactly. Tage breakout. Dahlin was doing amazing. They all earned those big contracts. And then this season, we're just kind of switched it up. And I don't know if maybe they went back to it against the Leafs. I mean, I know Granato mentioned that that's something they're looking at doing, is going back to playing last year's system and just dealing with whatever consequences happen. Like when they arise, like if there's issues defensively, we'll tackle it then, but we just need to go back to something we know and we know we're good at. Get some confidence flowing, get some goals, right? Because, if Tage and the boys and Cuzzy and Peterka and Quinn and Skinner, and they're all putting home goals, but we're losing, like maybe you can convince them to back check a bit harder, because like, hey, you guys are getting 5 a game, but we're giving up 6. So like, if you guys just back check a little bit harder, we'll get some wins and you get the points. So I don't know.
Yeah. I wonder though, if any sort of trade acquisitions or, big deadline splashes would be able to help them reach that point to 666 margin that you're looking for. Yeah.
And you know what? That will perfect segue, Abby. Applaud to you, because we're now going to talk about the teams that we think are going to be buyers and sellers at the deadline. And, I'll just go ahead and start that. I don't think the Sabres are going to be a buyer. Mm-hmm. It may look like it makes sense, but when the roster's fully healthy, like it has been, or like it was, I say has been, like it hasn't been, it was against Toronto. We saw what that did, right? You've got the first line of Skinner, Thompson, and Tuck. We know that line is great. You got the second line of Peterka, Cousins, Quinn. Third line of Greenway, Middlestat, Benson, and then the fourth line of Olofsson, Krebs, Oposo.
Sounds pretty good
I really
to
don't.
Me.
I don't see who you're slotting out of there. If anything, you're probably going after a defenseman, but then all of a sudden you've got like 9 NHL defensemen on the roster, and it's just like, what do you do? Who's moving? Who's going? You're not going to get rid of Eric Johnson because this is probably his swan song season, right? Connor Clifton signed for 2 more years at like 3.75 or something like that, 3.3, something crazy. Power, Dahlin, Samuelson, Ryan Johnson's been awesome, right? So it's like, I don't see where you fit him in. And the goaltending has not been the issue this year. So I'm taking the Sabres out of the buyers. I don't think they're going to be a seller either. If anything, maybe they'll get rid of Olofsson if things really do bottom out, right? This is a fluke, a mirage. The Toronto game was our last good game. We just absolutely nosedive, right? But Speaking of nosedive, I think definitely a team that's going to be selling is Calgary.
Yeah, Calgary. We've seen we've seen Zadorov go to Vancouver, but I think a couple of other targets we could see are Chris Tanev. Obviously, the Leafs have shown interest. Even the Canucks have kind of gone back to it. Tanev has a big history in Vancouver, but I personally wouldn't want them pursuing it, considering you already have Zadorov, and it's going to end up with a little bit of a logjam on defense. I'd rather see them pursue him perhaps in free agency at a nice little discount or something like that. But the Leafs, I'll be honest, I'm very surprised the Leafs haven't pulled the trigger on something, because they certainly have the draft picks and maybe even a couple of lower level prospects to be able to contribute and do that. And they certainly need the help on defense, especially given their goaltending situation. You can use all the help you can get. And the thing is, Tanev can be useful to any sort of playoff contender, right? Tanev's a defensive defenseman, blocks shots, has finally been healthy in recent years, which was a big issue in Vancouver. Obviously Vancouver has one of the longest travel schedules, along with his style of blocking shots led to him getting a lot of injuries, but he's been better in recent years. So he's a good asset for any sort of team that wants to acquire him, put them on on their second or third pairing. He's a great shutdown guy, and he works really, really well. He was probably Quinn Hughes' best defense partner until Hronek recently. So I think any contending team can go for him, but I think Toronto would probably end up being the best fit for Chris Tanev.
And you said Toronto. My mind immediately went to the goaltending situation. Like, you can't let the season just die or ride on Martin Jones' shoulders while you wait for Woll to get back from injury, right? And it just goes to this point. Like, Vancouver, are you guys? Is there an offer good enough that, say, New Jersey calls and they're like, we want DeSmith? No. Is there an offer? Like, are you guys selling? No,
absolutely not.
There's really not.
First in the league. Why would we be selling? That's absolutely foolish. I think ultimately for the Canucks,
my thought is maybe you had somebody to call up, and if the offer was good enough, it's your backup goalie, right? You're not saying let's get rid of Quinn Hughes or Demko. We're saying DeSmith. Okay.
No, I think that's absolutely foolish, right? You finally have someone who can take the load off Demko's back without hurting the team. I don't know what the win shares are exactly, but I'm sure Casey DeSmith has had more than his fair share. I would not be touching this team beyond where you have to. Obviously, the cap situation is going to get bad because OEL's buyout spikes over the next 2 years. I think it's over $4 million in dead cap. So you have to.
Well, here's a fun one for you.
Yeah.
Chris Johnson's big board. Andrei Kuzmenko is ranked 11th. Is he moving?
He could. Tocchet has been scratching him a lot. Notably, scored almost 40 goals last year, but he's been a little bit slower. He's still putting up some decent points this year, but he's been scratched quite a bit over the last 10 games or so. And I think he hasn't quite bought into the system the way Tocchet's wanted. He hasn't been forechecking, back-checking as hard. And normally I'd be very upset because I quite like Kuzmenko, and B, he's a point scorer. You want point scorers in the lineup, but it's very hard to argue with the results that are being put on the floor. I see like Nils Aman or Pius Suter playing with Mikheyev and Pettersson. It's like, well, why can't it be Kuzmenko? But then Pius Suter will go score a goal. Or it was Sam Lafferty earlier. Sam Lafferty bangs in a goal. I'm like, well, now how are you supposed to take them out of the lineup?
Right, they're doing the thing right. Not everybody needs to be the sniper, right? You need guys, I feel like, on every line that do the things that complement each other. It's not necessarily about we're seeing this with the Penguins, who I think are going to be sellers. I think the Penguins are going to have to sell off, right? I mean, they need assets. They need to get younger. Yeah, I mean, maybe I really can't see them being in a position where buying makes any logical sense, right? Like, but
I don't think
just because you put a bunch of names together,
they don't have a choice.
Just because you put a bunch of names together, like you said, like with Kuzmenko, right? Why Lafferty and not Kuzmenko? Just because you put a bunch of names together doesn't mean they're just going to gel and click and they're going to score a ton of goals like they always do.
Right. I'll agree with the second half of your point there, where I thought the Carlson trade was quite foolish. We already saw when he was on the same team as Brent Burns that they cut into each other. Having two offensive defensemen who take that PP1 slot from each other leads to both their production dropping. It's happening again with Letang. So I think that was a very foolish acquisition. If you wanted to go for some sort of big splash, you could have gone for Elias Lindholm. You could have traded for honestly anything else. Even if you wanted someone on the back end, you could have gone for maybe more of a two-way presence and let Letang continue to power play or quarterback the power play. But I can't see them selling. They're committing to Crosby and Malkin and Letang's older years for better or for worse. They seem committed to it. So to tank with those veterans on your team when you're committed to not moving them, I think they're in purgatory. I think they're screwed. But I don't.
Well, the question is, what do they do with Gensel? Gensel, right? Like he doesn't have a contract extension.
I think they got to pay the man whatever he wants. He wants $10 million. Oh well, you got to pay the man, and then whatever else you have to get rid of outside of the vets, you have to get rid of.
Oh, man, it's just Pittsburgh's not in a good situation right now, and
no.
I even said before the season I thought their power play was going to be good. Their power play is not even good, man. So it screams like a team that's going to trade away Vinny Hinostroza for a sixth. Yeah. And, maybe get rid of Chad Ruedel to the Leafs, right? So they're probably going to tear down the bottom. Yeah, they're going to tear down the bottom of this roster. But, I mean, you're not getting rid of Sid or Malkin. I mean, that'd be crazy. No, he's not getting traded. I wanted to fantasize about it for a second because it could be crazy. But, ultimately what I'm looking at here is I'm looking at a lot of teams that like the underperformers. I was going to say Minnesota, but they're probably not going to go after a goalie. I'm thinking a team like Montreal with Montembeault and Allen. Are they going to finally get rid of Jake Allen? Please send him to a playoff contender. I really want to watch Jake Allen play good hockey again and not play in Montreal. Not saying Montreal plays bad hockey, but you know what I mean, right? Like, is New Jersey calling about Jake Allen?
Yeah, New Jersey. Yeah,
and I think. Yeah, Edmonton's another one. Is Stuart's? I don't think Stuart Skinner's the guy, but he's the best they got, right? Jack Campbell's not even the starter down in the A, so yikes.
What a fall from grace.
Seattle. You know what? Seattle might be the kind of team that I'm going to really pay attention to what they do, right? Because they're hanging in there. They're right around it, right? They go on a little run here, which we know they can do. Maybe they work their way into a buyer conversation, but Seattle's a team, technically they're behind Calgary, but I think Calgary's going to sell off more than Seattle, and Calgary should commit to a rebuild. Is Seattle going to sell off because they've got like four middle lines, right? They got like four second or third lines, right? They don't have any top lines. Beniers is kind of in that sophomore slump. Did they just kind of take we'll just reassess, get rid of some of the expiring contracts or some of the guys with value, reset, retool, get younger, and make another run at it surrounding our core with more draft picks and prospects or young players that can contribute? Or are they going to say, listen, we know what we're capable of. Let's see if we can just add another one of these second liners, these third liners to our team and see if we can just catch fire and go again.
No, that's a good question. I think the Kraken, they could be another one of those teams, kind of like the Sabres, that choose to stand pat. But if anything, I think I would lean towards them slightly selling. Certainly not any of their core pieces, but some of their depth. I think they could be shelling out for draft picks and then just trying to recoup it through free agency. And again, teams like Toronto, teams like Edmonton, teams that just need some more depth would be more than welcome to put in offers. I also, certain things I always think about, and it's kind of weird why. I think, again, another reason why Tanev to Calgary works is you often don't want to trade within the division, or if you are trading within the division, there's usually a higher price associated with stuff. So that's why I'm still a bit perplexed not to see Toronto acquire someone, whether it be Tanev or someone from the Kraken as well, whether it's one of their defensemen or one of their bottom six forwards as a bit of a bolster for their own roster, because they're in opposite conferences. They're not going to be seeing each other until the Stanley Cup Finals. They won't, by the way, but just on some miracle run, they won't be seeing each other. So I'm curious to see why the Leafs haven't done anything. Maybe they think that once Woll comes back, the problems will fix themselves, but yeah, I think I could see the Kraken selling, I think.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the roster freeze, because this is the perfect time of year for everybody to assess what they have, You're basically halfway through the season, but there's still there's still 50 games for a lot of teams, 48, right? We're in that range where you can still play over half a season and make the playoffs. Or are you just going to commit to being bad like Ottawa? Like just it's crazy. Ottawa has 0 overtime losses. Same thing with the Preds. Like and the Ducks. That's crazy. Stat. It can't. Right? Who would have thought at this point of the year? But I think buying and selling, I think it'll ramp up in January, which is why we're having this conversation now before the roster freeze to really get ahead of it and see who might be doing things. Because, by the time Calgary gets rid of Lindholm and maybe Tanev, things are going to start moving, right? I mean, maybe we see the Islanders go out and pick up one of these guys because the Islanders like to make their trades early before the deadline, which I think is smart. I think teams should be making trades in January, not late February, because at that point they can't pick up. They aren't assimilating into the roster, but it should be a fun one, man. It really should be. And listen, Sabres, go beat the Rangers. Maybe I'll give you some love. Don't talk to me again next week if they can't string 2 together in this stretch here. So enjoy your time at the top, buddy. We're coming someday, but that day's not today.
No, sir. I will. You know what? I'm going to be cheering for you when you guys are really, really far in the rear view mirror. But I'll be watching, and I'm wishing you all the best as well. It'd be nice to see the Sabres, turn it around and hit that crazy record, as unlikely as it is. But I also do want to take a moment here to send my condolences to the Ottawa Senators owner. Buys the team immediately, Shane Pinto freaking situation, and then just the you have all these good players, on paper the Sabres are not that bad of a team, especially that forward core. You got Stützle, you got Batherson, you got all these, you got Kachuk, you got all these great players, and they're just not doing good. They're just not playing well. And I think firing DJ Smith is a good step, but
absolutely. But it's hilarious that in the offseason, like the Sabres fans, the Senators fans, and the Red Wings fans, we're all arguing with each other to see who would be better. And we're all kind of ended up in the same spot like we're used to here in the Atlantic. So hopefully something changes, and I hope it's for Buffalo's sake. But we'll have to find out next time. I want to say thank you to everybody that's listening to this all the way through. You guys are the best. If you are enjoying it, make sure to leave a like on the YouTube video or a 5-star rating on the podcast app that you are using. We are everywhere. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to take it on the go, we're on Spotify, Pocket Cast, Apple Podcast, all you name it, iHeartRadio. We're everywhere. So
iHeartRadio.
Thank you. Yes, and we heart you. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you guys in the next one.
Peace.